Okay. We have olive, cup base olive. A cask which is broken, we may save from it enough food for 3 meals. And one may say to others, come and save for yourselves. However, he may not soak it up with a sponge. We may not press fruits to extract juice from them, or even if they float out by themselves, they are prohibited. Rabbi Yehuda says if they were intended for food, the juice that flows to them is permitted, but if they were intended for juice, what flows to them is prohibited. Honeycombs, which one crushed before Shabbos and the honey flowed out by itself, are prohibited. Rabbi Elazar, however, permits them. Anything that was put in hot water before the Sabbath may be soaked in hot water on the Sabbath. But anything that was not put in water before Shabbos may not be rinsed in hot water on Shabbos, except an old salted fish, small salted fish, or a Spanish mackerel, because the rinsing completes the preparation. A person may break open a cask to eat dried figs from it, provided he does not intend to make a vessel. We may not perforate the bund of a cask. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, and that the common, however, permitted, but one may not perforate it on its side. If it was perforated, one may not place wax upon it because he smooths it. And Rabbi Yehuda says an incident came before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, an Arab, and he said, "I fear on account that he may be liable for a sin offering." Okay.
Okay. Nosnin tavshil lesoch habor bishvil sheyeh shamor. Okay, so the Mishnah gives you permission to put food down a well at the bottom.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now why would you have thought that it's a problem to put a food down the bottom of a well? Because if you're putting your food there, you might come to smooth out the ground. So there's your thought of why it might be usher. Don't worry about it. We're not worried that you're going to smooth out the ground. Similarly, you're allowed to put nice water, fresh water into undrinkable water, in order to make it cool down. So if the bad water is colder, then you're allowed to take your kli of cold water of good water and put it into there to cool it down. But that should be obvious. But the following it's brought agav the following statement, which is b'chama b'shvil sheyechamu. But you're also allowed to take cold water that you want to heat up and put it in the sun. And that is okay because you're putting it directly in the sun. We said that there was a problem with toldos chama because it looks like toldos ha'esh. Toldos ha'esh is asur midoraisa. But toldos chama is asur midrabanan because it looks like toldos ha'esh. But putting
Right.
it directly in the sun, that's fine. Okay. Right. Now, what happens? Somebody was walking and he went through a river, or he fell in a river, or basically his clothes got wet, and now
Right.
he's dripping wet. And what is he supposed to do with his clothes? He's allowed to carry on walking in them. He doesn't have to strip off and stuff because he might come to squeeze his clothes out. Just carry on walking in your wet clothes and zeo. And now once he gets back to the city and he gets to the first chatzer, he can now strip off. Shotchan b'chama, he can now take off his clothes and leave them out in the sun to dry. Aval lo keneged ha'am. Now the Mishnah over here, but not in public, basically. Now the Mishnah over here is not lahalacha because we say that if anything that's not allowed to be done except in private, anything that's not allowed to be done because of maris ayin. Um,
Right.
because if a person puts out his clothes in the sun, it looks like he did the laundry that day. Um, so you're not allowed to do it in public, and that's why the Mishnah says not to. But the halacha is that if you can't do it in public, you also can't do it in private. Just don't make it. There's no difference, and a person should not do that. Okay. Harochet b'mei mara u'b'mei tveria v'nistapaga. So a guy on Shabbos went to the cave or to the hot springs of Tveria, and he took a dip. Maybe this is like his mikvah thing. He wanted to go to mikvah on the day, and now he's got a towel with him, and he dries himself off. Now this is obviously his whole body that he's drying off. Afilu be'eser aluntios, even if he uses 10 separate towels, so that no one of them is particularly wet. Lo yavi'em biyado. he's not allowed to bring them back into the house, even through a place. But we're not talking about here because of Rosh Hashanah. We're talking even in a case where there's an Eruv and he can carry
Mhm.
carry the towels with him, but he's not allowed to carry the towels because of the chashash that he's going to squeeze them. Okay, lo v'yavim biyado. Aval asara b'nei adam. If you have 10 people together, uh, and they all happen to use one towel. I mean, we'll take an extreme example over here. Uh, so even if they used one towel, so this towel is dripping wet from drying themselves. Paneihim yadeim ragleihim, and they wash their hands, face, and feet. Mevian also osa biyadan. But this is talking halacha where all that they washed was their hands, face, and feet, not their entire bodies. Um, and and now this towel is dripping wet, but they're allowed to carry it between them. Um, one reason is because there are 10 of them and they're going to remind each other, no, you shouldn't be squeezing this out. Okay. Um, the Gemara also brings that this is not the halacha. The halacha is not like our Mishnah, but even one person is allowed to bring back the towel that he washed that he washed his body with on Shabbos, and we don't worry that he's going to squeeze it out. Okay.
It
Um,
says, and they may carry. They don't mean all 10 people and they carry the one towel.
yeah, well, I mean, any one of the 10 people can carry it, and
Any one of the 10
and we're
carry.
not worried that he's going to squeeze it because the other people will remind him.
Right, right, right. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Hmm.
Whoa.
Okay, Sachin umashme'ishin bivnei me'ayim. Okay, so you're allowed to rub oil on your stomach. This is it's considered regular anointing. It's not considered a refuah. Aval lo mis amlin velo mis gardin. You're not allowed to rub it hard because that's being done for a refuah. Velo mis gardin and scratching. Is that right? Is that how it's translated?
It says scrape. Knead or scrape the skin.
Scraping. Okay, the Ein Yordin Le Cordima. Now, Cordima is a place that's described as having like very steep, muddy banks,
Mhm.
and if a person goes down there, then it's very likely that they're going to fall in. Yordin Le Cordima, yeah, it's very muddy. Um, so he's gonna fall in, and he's gonna come to squeezing out his clothes. Okay, and that's why we don't allow him to go to Kordima. But ein osin if if apictivizin. Apictivizin is an emetic, which
Mhm.
basically makes you throw up.
Right.
Right. So if somebody's feeling like they need to get it all out, you take a Pictivizin. But you can't do that on Shabbos because that's obviously being done for a refuah. Nobody takes that just
Right.
for general enjoyment. The ein ma'atzvin is a katan. If you have a child whose bones are, a little misshapen, they need to be corrected or something like that. That's something that's also considered a refuah on Shabbos. There's some sort of therapy that you give them by holding, um,
Right.
tying up their limbs to put them in the right direction. Ve'ein machzirin es hasheder. And if somebody has broken a bone, I think we must be talking here about a compound fracture, because like you're trying to put the bone back in place.
Right.
That and the Mishnah, the commentary comes and says actually no, the halacha is not like the Mishnah. You do return if a person has a compound fracture like that, I guess it must be dangerous.
Right.
You need to put it back in place. But what's really difficult over here in the Mishnah is Mishin Nifrika Yado V'Raglo. He has a dislocation in his hand or his leg. Lo yitrefem betonin. You can't even soak them in cold water to give him to help him to heal. I'm not sure how soaking in cold water helps to heal, but if it gives them some sort of pain relief, that would be kind of a good thing for somebody who's just dislocated a limb. And I mean, me personally, if I saw somebody on Shabbos with a dislocated limb and they're screaming in pain,
Right.
I'm gonna tell them like, no, sorry, you can't.
I can't do this right.
I don't know. This is one of the more difficult ones. I find it hard to paskin anything like that. But what am I? I'm not a. I don't have smicha in Hilchos Shabbos.
Right.
I find it very difficult to imagine any Rav who's going to have a patient in front of him who's busy screaming, "Please, can I put my my shoulder back into its joint?"
Right. Right.
Uh, so sorry,
I
go
remember,
in the Shabbos.
one time a friend of mine, he lives in Washington Heights. He's a one of the Breuer people, and someone had fallen outside the shul, and they were going to take him to the hospital. That kind of thing. The Rav said, "No, you can't. We'll do it after Shabbos. Just leave it be. We'll give him a cane and help him walk, or something like. We couldn't have the cane. They couldn't because they didn't have an Arab there. That was the problem. Also, they had an Arab, and there was no Arab there, so they couldn't give him a cane. They had him. I don't know
If you're
how they. I don't know what they
You're
did.
talking about a Shiloh, if he was going to allow him to drive into hospital, then the cane is like nothing.
Right. Right. No, no, no. I remember one time when I broke my ankle, and they had to he said, I have to set this now. You're not going to be. I mean, he said, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to like me at all. So
Uh,
he brought in his assistant, this big, gigantic guy, and he held me down, and they gave me morphine and all that kind of stuff. My wife said they heard me out in the waiting room,
oh,
screaming so much. But he said, if I don't do this, there's no blood going down there. I need to do this, otherwise you lose your
yeah.
foot. So uh, it was.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that pain. I remember that.
Yeah. Okay. Moral
Anyway,
of the story
I
done.
did. I did. I
Travis.
did like him afterwards. Though. I did like him afterwards. He was okay afterwards.
Anyway, just finishing off the Mishnah.
All right.
We can wash it the normal way that he washes it. And if it helps him, then Shalom al Yisrael. Okay. And that's it.
Okay. Yud Zion Hey. All utensils which may be taken on the Sabbath, fragments of them may also be taken with them, provided they can still be used to perform some sort of task. For example, fragments of a mixing bowl with which to cover the mouth of a cask, or fragments of a glass with which to cover the mouth of a flask. The Yehuda says, provided they can still perform in the nature of their former tasks, for example, fragments of a mixing bowl into which one pours porridge, or fragments of a glass into which one pours oil. A stone that is in a gourd shell, if water can be drawn with it without it swelling out, we may draw water with it, and if not, we may not draw water with it. A branch that is tied to a pitcher, we may draw water with it on the Sabbath. A window shutter, Rebbe Eliezer says, when it is fastened and suspended, we may shut the window with it, and if not, we may not shut the window with it. But the comments say, in either case, we may shut the window with it. Okay.
Space. Space.
Okay, base, base.
Um,
We may not light with oil that must be burnt on Yom Tov, and Yishmael says we may not with tar because of honor due Sabbath. But the Chachamim prepare lighting with the oils, namely with the sesame oil, not oil with radish oil, with fish oil, or colocynth oil, or with tar or naphthah. Rav Tarfon says we may light only with olive oil. We may not light with a product of a tree except flax. And no tree product can contract contamination, can contract tumor contamination from sheltering a contaminated object except flax. A wick made from cloth that once twisted but does not singe. Reb Eliezer says it is susceptible to tumor contamination and we may not light with it. Reb Akiva says it is not susceptible to tumor contamination and we may light with it. One may not pierce an eggshell, fill it with oil, put it over the mouth of a lamp so the oil will drip even if the container is of earthenware. But Reb Yehuda permits this. However, if the potter attached it originally, it is permitted because it is a single vessel. One may not fill a bowl with oil, put it beside a lamp, and put at the end of the wick into it, the bowl, so that it will draw oil. Rabbi Yehuda permits this. Okay.
uh,
Well, okay, Chumos. Okay. Well. I'm sorry. The Elliot says one may pay with one kind for another, provided he pays from the superior for the inferior kind. But Rebbe Akiva says one may pay only with the same kind. Therefore, if he ate cucumbers of the 6th year, he must wait for the cucumbers to the 8th year and pay with them. From the same source that Rebbe Eliezer derives this lenient ruling, Rebbe Akiva derives this stringent ruling, as it is written, and he shall give the holy thing to the priest, and anything that may become holy. So Rebbe Akiva says that he shall give the holy thing to the priest, the holy thing he ate. If one eats truma willfully, he must repay its value, but does not pay the fifth. the payment is chulin, and if the priest wants to forgo the payment, he may. If a priest's daughter married a non-priest and afterwards ate truma, she repays its value but does not pay the fifth, and her death is by burning. If she was married to any one of those ineligible, she must repay its value plus a fifth, and her death is by strangling. So says Reb Meir. But if the come and say both repay its value but do not pay the fifth, and their death is by burning.
Yeah.
Okay. Moros. Okay, Yud Zion. Regarding one who was emptying a pit and a sheretz was found in the first barrel, all the barrels are tummy. If it was found in the last barrel, that barrel is tummy, and all the others are tahor. When is this? When he empties the pit using each barrel, but if he empties the pit with a dipper, if the sheretz was found in one of the barrels, that alone is tummy. When is this? When he checks the barrels but does not cover them, or he covers them but does not check them. But if he checks the barrels and covers them, and the sheretz was found in a barrel, everything is tummy. If the sheretz was found in the pit, everything is tummy. And if it was found in the ladle, everything is tummy. The section between the rounds and the grape skins is a public domain. The section of the vineyard that is in front of the harvesters is a private domain. That which is behind the harvesters is a public domain. And when is this? And the public enters from this opening and leaves from that opening. Vessels of the olive press and of the wine press, such as the mess basket, when they are made of wood, he scours them and they are suitable to be made tahor. When they're made of gemi, he ages them for a full 12 years, or scalds them in boiling water. And Rav Josie says he puts them in the rapids of a river, it suffices.
105 if there's Toros.
Do
And
mikvos first?
yeah, 105
Mikvos first.
mikvahs.
Okay. These are the 6 grades of mikvos, each higher than the other. The first grade is water in water holes. If a tummy person drank from it, and then a tahor person drank from it, he becomes tummy. If a tummy person drank from it, and then one drew from it into a tahor vessel, it becomes tummy. If a tummy person drank from it, and then a loaf of truma fell into it, and if it's rinsed, it becomes tummy. If he did not rinse, it remains tahor.
Okay.
And okay, Yud Gimel base. If he said, I take upon myself to bring a mincha offering or a kind of mincha offering, he brings one. If he said mincha offerings or a kind of mincha offerings, he brings two. If he said, I specify, but I do not what I specified, he must bring all 5 of them. If he said, I specified a mincha offering of Isserons, but do not know what I specified, he must bring a mincha offering of 60 Isseron. Rabbi says he must bring all mincha offerings from 1 to 60 Isseron. If he said, I take upon myself to bring pieces of wood, he may not bring less than 2 logs. Frankincense, he may not bring less than a chometz. There are 5 chometzim. If one said, I take upon myself to bring frankincense, he may not bring a chometz. One who donates a mincha offering must bring. Sorry?
Huh?
He may not bring less than a chometz.
Yeah.
One who donates a mincha offering must bring with it a chometz of frankincense, and one who offers a chometz outside the temple courtyard is liable, and the 2 spoonfuls require 2 chometzim. If I take upon myself to bring gold, he may not bring less than a dinner of gold. Silver, he may not bring less than a dinner of silver. Copper, he may not bring less than the equivalent of a amount of silver. I specify, but I do not know what I specified. He must bring until he can say, I did not intend this.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm still the way to go.
And Nazir.
Nazir. Okay. Gimel Zion. Someone about whom 2 sets of witnesses were testifying. These testified that he declared 2 terms of Naziris, and they testified he declared 5 terms of Naziris. Beit Shammai says the testimony is split, and there is no Naziris here. The Basil says 2 is included in the 5, and so he is a Nazir for 2 terms. Someone who said, I am a Nazir, and his friend heard and said, and I, they are all Nazirim. If the first is released, they are all released. The last is released, the last is permitted, but all the others are bound. If he said, I am a Nazir, and his friend heard and said, my mouth is like his mouth, or my hair is like his hair, he is a Nazir. If he said, I am a Nazir, and his wife heard and said, and he may revoke hers, but his stands. And if she said, I am a Nazira, and her husband heard it, and he said, and he cannot revoke it. If he said, I'm a Nazir, and you, and she said, Amen, he can revoke hers, but his stands. If she said, I am a Nazir, and you said, and he said, Amen, he cannot revoke. A woman who vowed to be her.
That can.
That was it. That was it. Oh.
That was it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Have a terrific day. I'll see you tomorrow. It's Thursday, right? All right.
It's a
Have
shame.
a great day.
Wow.
Thank you.
Bye.